No one talked about the cellar beneath the Hargrove Plantation. Not during the war, not after the war, and not even decades later, when the cotton fields turned quiet and the house fell into decay. But in March of 1865, when Union soldiers forced their way into the ruined plantation house in Talbot County, Georgia, they found something so disturbing that hardened men stepped back in silence. Beneath the rotting floorboards was a hidden space no bigger than a small stall. The walls were covered in hundreds of scratch marks. In the corner lay a rusted chain attached to nothing. And pressed into the dried mud were two sets of handprints. One adult, one impossibly small. What truly happened in that cellar was locked away in military files for 60 years. When those records were finally opened, 3 full pages were missing. Tonight, we begin uncovering what history tried to erase. This story is about survival, about secrets, and about a child who heard something she was never meant to hear. The nightmare began in the spring of 1864. That year, Georgia felt like it was holding its breath. The heat arrived early, heavy and wet, making the air shimmer over the red clay fields. The Hargrove Plantation stretched across 300 acres, not the largest in the county, but large enough to require 32 enslaved people to keep it alive. At the end of a long dirt road stood the main house. 2 stories tall, white paint peeling, porch sagging under its own weight. Magnolia trees lined the drive, their branches bare, as if they had given up blooming. Thomas Hargrove owned it all. He was 43 years old, thin-haired, sharp-eyed, and cold in his ways. He had inherited the plantation from his father, along with a belief that people could be owned, controlled, and discarded. Where his father had been clever and feared, Thomas was simply cruel and nervous. The war was closing in. Union patrols were drawing nearer every week. Supplies were low, profits were disappearing, and Thomas could feel his world slipping away. His wife Margaret stayed upstairs, rarely leaving her bedroom. The local doctor called it nervous exhaustion. In truth, grief had hollowed her out. She had buried 3 infants in as many years. After the last tiny coffin was lowered into the ground, something inside her broke. She stared out the window most days. Silent, hands shaking. Thomas visited once a week, standing in the doorway, asking if she needed anything. She never answered. Running the plantation day to day was Virgil Cates, the overseer. Virgil was 35, thick-necked, hard-handed, and eager to hurt. He had grown up poor and learned early that pain was power. He carried a leather strap at all times and used it often. The enslaved people feared him more than they feared Thomas, because Virgil enjoyed cruelty. Among those enslaved was a girl named Bess. Bess was 11 years old. Small, quiet, observant. She worked inside the main house, scrubbing floors, carrying water, emptying chamber pots, cleaning up messes no one wanted to acknowledge. She moved like a shadow, careful not to be seen, careful not to be remembered. Her mother had been sold when Bess was 6 years old, sent away to pay off a gambling debt. Bess remembered screaming and clinging to her mother's dress. She remembered Virgil dragging her away and locking her in the smokehouse for 2 days so she would learn obedience. She never saw her mother again. Bess slept beneath the kitchen stairs, in a crawlspace barely tall enough to sit up. Dirt floor, rough wooden walls, one thin blanket, a straw pallet, and a small wooden box with her only treasures. A smooth river stone, a piece of blue glass, a scrap of fabric that once belonged to her mother. It was not much, but it was hers. Late one night in April, Bess woke suddenly. Something was wrong. She lay still, listening. Through the gaps in the floorboards above her, she heard boots pacing across the kitchen. Heavy steps. Fast. Nervous. Thomas Hargrove was speaking. His voice was low, tight with fear. "You are certain no one saw you bring him here?" Another voice answered. Rough. Confident. Dead certain. "Virgil." Bess pressed her ear closer to the floor. "Found him in the North Woods. Bullet in the shoulder. Fever bad. He will be dead by morning without help." "Then let him die in the woods," Thomas snapped. "Why did you bring him here?" "Because he has information. Confederate intelligence. Union troop movements. Supply routes. Plans. He says he has been behind enemy lines for months." Silence followed. "Union patrols are looking for him," Virgil continued. If they find him, they will hang him. We hide him in the cellar until he recovers. The cellar is not secure, Thomas whispered. Slaves go down there daily. Not the back section, the old root cellar your father sealed years ago. Nobody goes there. We open it, hide him, seal it again. Bess felt her stomach twist. A wounded Confederate spy, hidden beneath the house. A man whose secrets could keep the war going longer. A man whose survival meant more suffering for people like her. Thomas finally spoke. If this fails, we hang. If the Confederacy finds out we delayed, we hang. God help us. I will handle everything, Virgil said. Footsteps moved toward the cellar door. Hinges creaked. Then silence returned. Bess lay awake long after. Heart pounding, mind racing. She should have forgotten what she heard. Should have gone back to sleep. Should have stayed invisible. But Bess knew something now. And knowledge was the only power she had. The next morning, Ruth the cook sent her to the cellar for preserves. Bess stood at the top of the cellar steps, staring down into the darkness. She did not know it yet, but this was the first step toward a secret that would stain the Hargrove Plantation forever. And once she descended those stairs, nothing would ever be the same. Part 2. The Girl Who Entered the Wall. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Others choose a keeper. On the Hargrove Plantation, beneath jars of preserves and hanging meat, a hidden man was dying in the dark. And the only soul who knew the truth was an 11-year-old girl no one ever looked at twice. The cellar smelled of earth and salt and old wood. Rows of shelves held jars of vegetables, sacks of cornmeal, and slabs of smoked meat dangling from iron hooks. It was cool down here, a relief from the heavy Georgia heat that pressed down on the house like a weight. Bess moved carefully, barefoot on the packed dirt floor. Her eyes went straight to the back wall. Behind the jars of preserves, just as Virgil had said, the boards looked wrong. Newer wood, cleaner nails. A place that did not belong. Long ago, someone had sealed this doorway shut after an enslaved man hid there during a punishment and nearly died before he was found. Bess pressed her ear to the wood. At first there was nothing. Then she heard it. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Strained. A sound that told her the man behind the wall was still alive but barely. Every breath rattled like it might be his last. Pain lived in that sound. Bess grabbed the jars Ruth had asked for and hurried back upstairs, saying nothing. But that night, lying beneath the kitchen stairs, she could not escape the image of a wounded man sealed in darkness, depending entirely on Virgil Cates for survival. And Virgil did not value lives. Bess had seen him beat a man to death for trying to run. She knew that if the wounded soldier became a problem, Virgil would let him die without hesitation. Over the next 3 days, Bess watched closely. Virgil disappeared into the house at odd hours, always carrying something. A canteen, a wrapped bundle, a small box that smelled of camphor and blood. He was keeping the man alive. But Virgil's face grew darker each day. One evening, while Bess polished silver in the dining room, she heard raised voices from the study. The wound is rotting, Virgil said. Infection is spreading. He needs a doctor. Absolutely not, Thomas replied. Every doctor in the county is being watched. Bring one here and Union soldiers will follow. Then what do you want me to do? Let him die if necessary. Bess felt her hands begin to shake. We bury him in the woods and no one ever knows, Thomas continued. The war is lost. I am not burning my house or hanging for a cause already dead. You are a coward, Virgil said. I am a realist. Footsteps followed. A door slammed. The wounded man was going to die. That night, Bess made her choice. She waited until the house slept. Until Ruth's snoring filled the kitchen. Then she slipped from her crawlspace, took a small candle and a single match, and crept down the cellar stairs. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it would betray her. The candle cast wild shadows across the walls. The cellar seemed to breathe around her. At the sealed doorway, she knelt and examined the boards. One near the bottom was loose. Old, swollen from dampness. She worked at it with her fingers. Splinters cut her skin. Her nails broke. Pain burned. Finally, the board shifted free with a soft creak that sounded like thunder in the silence. Behind it was darkness. And the smell. Sickness. Blood. Infection. Human waste. Death trying to arrive. She gagged. Who is there? A voice whispered from the dark. Virgil. No, Bess whispered back. I am not Virgil. I brought water. She slid a tin cup through the opening. There was movement, slow dragging sounds. A trembling hand took the cup. Water spilled as the man drank desperately. Thank you, he breathed. You are the Confederate scout, Bess said. I heard them. Who are you? Nobody. Just a girl they do not see. You should not be here. They will not catch me. After a long pause, she asked the question she feared most. Are you going to die? Probably, he said calmly. Infection is spreading. A few days. Maybe a week. He coughed, wet and deep. I wish I could have delivered my information. Made my death mean something. Bess thought of her mother. Sold. Gone. Probably dead. She thought of cruelty done without reason. Of people treated like tools. Of being invisible. I know some medicine, she said. Herbs. Poultices. Ruth taught me. I could try. Why would you help me? He asked. If I live, your people stay enslaved longer. Maybe, she said slowly. Or maybe we just get different masters. I do not know what freedom looks like. But I know what it is like to be trapped in darkness with no one coming. What is your name? Bess. I am Daniel. Daniel Pritchard. If they catch you, he said, they will punish you badly. They might kill you. I know, she answered. But I am tired of being invisible. She replaced the board and returned to her crawlspace, her body shaking with fear and something else. Purpose. The next night she returned. And the night after that. She brought food in tiny stolen pieces. Cornbread. A boiled egg. Meat scraps. She brought clean rags and healing salve made from lard and crushed leaves. Through the narrow gap, she cleaned Daniel's wound. It was terrible, swollen, oozing, hot with fever. The smell made her eyes water. She packed the wound with salve, changed bandages, gave him willow bark tea to reduce the fever. Every night was a risk. But somehow she remained unseen. Weeks passed. The fever broke. The infection slowly retreated. Daniel grew stronger. In the darkness, they talked. He told her about his farm in the Appalachian foothills. His wife Catherine. His daughter Emma. One night he spoke softly. I thought I was fighting for freedom. For my home. That is what they told us. But lying here, hidden beneath a house built on suffering, I am no longer sure what freedom really means. Bess listened. Above them, history was burning. Below them, a secret was alive. And someone was watching. When you are ready, I can continue with part 3, where Union patrols draw closer. Virgil begins to suspect. And the cellar starts to change. Just tell me. Part 3. Voices in the dark. History does not change in speeches or on battlefields. Sometimes it changes in whispers beneath the floor of a plantation house, where two people who were never meant to meet speak truths that can never be taken back. Beneath the Hargrove Plantation, in a sealed cellar that smelled of earth and sickness, a Confederate soldier and an enslaved child shared the kind of conversation that could destroy them both. Night after night, Bess returned to the hidden wall. She brought water, food, clean rags, healing salve, and she brought something just as dangerous. Conversation. In the darkness, Daniel Pritchard's voice grew stronger as his body healed. But his words grew heavier, as if something inside him was breaking open. One night, after a long silence, he spoke. I used to believe I was fighting for my home, he said quietly. For my land, for my way of life. I thought it was about states' rights. About keeping the North from telling us how to live. That is what they told us, he continued. The politicians, the preachers, the men who never held a rifle or slept in the mud. They said we were defending honor. I believed them. His breathing was slow now, steadier than before. I thought I was fighting for something noble. Something worth dying for. He stopped speaking for a long moment. But the longer this war goes on, the more I see the truth. It is about chains. It is about rich men protecting their wealth. About men like Thomas Hargrove keeping their power. And men like me bleeding for it while men like you suffer silently. I do not know how to live with that. Bess listened. She had learned early that white people often needed to speak their guilt out loud. They needed someone to hear it, to carry it, to make sense of it for them. It was not her job to forgive him. It was not her job to comfort him. But she appreciated honesty, even when it arrived late. You did not make this system alone, she said softly. But you helped protect it. Daniel did not argue. I know. The cellar was quiet again, except for the sound of breathing and the distant creak of the house above them. When Bess finally spoke again, her voice was calm. My mother was sold when I was 6. I still remember her hands. The way they felt on my face. But her voice is fading. Like a picture left in the sun. Daniel swallowed hard. She was sent to Alabama. I do not know if she lives. I do not know if she remembers me. She told him about the endless work. The fear that never slept. The way small rebellions kept her alive. Stealing a moment to watch the sunset. Keeping a smooth stone hidden in her pocket. Sometimes, she said, I pretend I am somewhere else. Somewhere no one owns me. Daniel listened in silence. Above them, something shifted. A footstep. Bess froze. They both heard it. The sound of boots on the cellar stairs. The candle went out. Bess pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. She heard a key turn. The cellar door opened. Light spilled across the shelves. Virgil Cates entered. He moved slowly, suspiciously. Bess held her breath as he passed within feet of her hiding place. He checked the shelves, counted jars, touched sacks of meal. Then he stopped. The loose board. Bess felt her blood turn cold. Virgil knelt, pressed his fingers against the wood. His brow furrowed. Someone has been here, he muttered. He stood suddenly. Who is down there? Daniel did not answer. Virgil cursed under his breath. He yanked at the board, but the way Bess had replaced it held for now. Virgil stepped back, breathing hard. Someone else knows, he whispered. Someone in this house knows. He locked the cellar door and stormed back upstairs. Bess did not move for a long time. When she finally returned to her crawlspace, she did not sleep. The next day, Virgil watched her. His eyes followed her through the house. His questions came sharper. Why are you in the cellar so often? Fetching supplies, she said calmly. You fetch more than you are told. Ruth snapped at him to leave the girl alone. But Virgil's suspicion had been lit. That night, Bess returned anyway. Virgil almost caught her. She barely slipped past him as he patrolled the hallway. Her heart nearly betrayed her. In the cellar, Daniel whispered. They are getting closer, he said. You must stop coming. I cannot, she replied. If they find you, they will hurt you. I am already hurt, she said. This just has a purpose. Daniel was quiet. Then he said something that frightened her. If I get strong enough, I will leave. Where will you go? To Union lines. Bess stared at the wall. That will make them hunt harder, she said. I know. They both understood what that meant. Danger was no longer coming. It was already inside the house. And someone else was listening. In the walls, in the cellar, in the shadows beneath the Hargrove Plantation. The secret was no longer safe. If you want, next I can write part 4, where Virgil sets a trap, the Union patrol arrives nearby, and the cellar begins to answer back. Just tell me. Part 4. The house begins to watch. Some houses remember. They remember footsteps. They remember screams. And when secrets grow heavy enough, the walls begin to listen. By early June of 1864, the Hargrove Plantation felt different. The air inside the house was thick, not just with heat, but with suspicion. Every door creaked louder than before. Every shadow felt crowded. Bess sensed it the moment she woke each morning. Something was tightening around them. Virgil Cates was no longer careless. He lingered in doorways, watched reflections in mirrors, counted supplies twice. He questioned Ruth about missing food. He questioned Thomas about cellar access. He questioned Bess with his eyes every time she crossed the room. Bess kept her head down, her hands steady, her face blank. She had learned long ago that fear was loud. Silence kept you alive, but the cellar was no longer safe. Daniel felt it too. One night, as Bess cleaned his wound by candlelight, he whispered, "They know. Maybe not everything, but they know something is wrong." Bess nodded. "I feel it." His shoulder had healed enough that he could sit upright now. His voice was stronger, too strong. "You must stop coming," he said again. "If I stop, they will wonder why. If you continue, they will catch you." They sat in silence, the candle flame trembling. Then Daniel said something worse. I overheard Virgil talking to Thomas today. Bess froze. He wants to move me. Move you where? He does not know yet. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere no one ever goes. He said the cellar wall feels wrong. That something is breathing behind it. Bess felt a chill crawl up her spine. The house knows, she whispered. Above them, the floorboards creaked. Footsteps. Virgil's voice drifted faintly through the boards. That night, Bess barely made it back to her crawlspace before Virgil passed through the kitchen with a lantern. He stopped near the stairs. Lifted the lantern high. The light brushed the small door to her hiding place. For a long moment, he stared at it. Then he turned away. The next day, Union patrols were spotted less than 5 miles away. Word spread fast. A neighbor's barn burned. Smoke rose on the horizon like a warning finger. Thomas Hargrove paced the house, drinking heavily, muttering to himself. If they search the house, he told Virgil, we are finished. Then we move him tonight, Virgil said. Bess heard everything. That night, thunder rolled across the plantation. Rain soaked the fields, turning the red clay to mud. It was the kind of night that swallowed sound. Perfect for secrets. Virgil went to the cellar with rope and a lantern. Bess followed barefoot, her heart screaming inside her chest. She hid behind the shelves as Virgil approached the sealed wall. Time to go, soldier, Virgil said. Daniel did not answer. Virgil ripped the loose board free. What he saw made him step back. Daniel was not alone. The wall behind him was covered in marks. Scratches. Deep grooves in the wood. Hundreds of them, old and new, layered over each other. Virgil's face drained of color. What the hell is this? Daniel whispered, this place remembers. Virgil grabbed Daniel roughly. You are coming with me. Daniel cried out as he was pulled forward. Blood seeped through his bandage. That was when Bess acted. She stepped into the lantern light. Stop. Virgil froze. His eyes locked on her. You, he said slowly. It was you. Bess did not run. You were going to let him die, she said. You were going to bury him like he was nothing. Virgil laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. You think you saved him. You have doomed yourself. He raised his hand. The house groaned. A deep cracking sound echoed through the cellar. The shelves shook. Jars shattered. The lantern fell. In the darkness, something shifted behind the wall. The old sealed boards split apart. The hidden root cellar opened. And inside it was not empty. Virgil screamed. Hands reached out of the darkness. Too many. Fingers thin and stiff, coated in dried mud. Bess fell back. Daniel stared in horror. The cellar breathed. The air filled with whispers. Low, broken, voices layered over each other. Virgil tried to run. The chain snapped tight around his ankle. The rusted chain that had been fastened to nothing. Now it was fastened to him. Bess covered her ears as Virgil was dragged into the dark. His screams cut off suddenly. Silence followed. Rain pounded above them. The cellar stank of earth and old blood. Daniel trembled. What was that? Bess whispered, this is where they hid the ones who disappeared. The house had been hungry for a long time. Footsteps thundered above. Thomas shouting. Soldiers yelling outside. Union voices. Bess grabbed Daniel. You have to go now. They slipped through the open cellar wall, crawling through the root cellar, out into the storm-soaked woods behind the house. Behind them, the Hargrove Plantation burned. And beneath it, the cellar closed its mouth. It had been fed. If you want, I can continue with part 5, where Union soldiers search the ruins. Thomas Hargrove faces judgment, and Bess disappears from the records. Just tell me when to continue. Part 5, Flames and Shadows. Some nights, the world changes in a single heartbeat. June 1864 had brought more than heat to Talbot County. It brought fire, fear, and the end of things that had been hidden too long. The Hargrove Plantation burned. Smoke rose thick over the red clay fields, twisting into the dark sky like fingers reaching for the moon. Flames consumed the peeling white paint, the sagging porch, and the walls that had held secrets for generations. Inside, chaos reigned. The house's memory, its hunger, had been awakened, and nothing would remain the same. Bess ran through the rain-soaked woods, holding Daniel by the hand. He was weak, feverish, but moving. The storm washed the blood and dirt from his skin, but it could not wash the terror from his mind. "We have to keep moving," Bess whispered. The fields were a maze of mud and broken fences. Horses panicked in their stalls, screaming, as Union soldiers approached the plantation from the north. The shouts of men, orders shouted over the storm, echoed through the forest. They had burned the Hargrove barns, and they would burn the house if they could. Bess led Daniel down a narrow creek, a path she had memorized as a child. Every root, every stone, every low-hanging branch was familiar. She moved like a shadow, silent, deadly careful. Daniel limped beside her, his breath ragged. He coughed violently, spitting blood into the mud. Bess pressed a hand over his mouth, guiding him forward. "You are going to be okay," she said. "I promise." He looked at her, eyes wide. "How can you be so sure?" Bess did not answer. She had no proof, only the certainty that inaction was death. That she could not turn back, even when everything she had ever known was gone in flames. Above them, the plantation was a furnace. Thomas Hargrove had tried to escape the chaos inside, dragging valuables through the back door. But the fire was faster. He found himself trapped, screaming at the ceiling as it collapsed, the smoke thick and black. He reached for a window, but the glass shattered under heat, cutting his palms. The flames licked his clothes, and the smell of burning wood and flesh filled his nostrils. The Union soldiers arrived moments later, guns raised, orders shouted. They did not stop to help Thomas. They were not interested in white men or their suffering. Their eyes were on the cellar, on the hidden chamber that might hold evidence of what had been done there. Inside, the root cellar was quiet now. The boards that Bess had left ajar lay scorched and blackened. The hands that had reached for Virgil Cates the night before had vanished back into the darkness. The cellar had claimed its tribute. Bess did not know what it meant. She did not know if it had been Virgil, or something older, something alive in the walls. She only knew that it had been hungry, and that it had been patient. Rain soaked her hair and ran down her neck. She pulled Daniel closer. "We need to find shelter," she said. "Somewhere no one will look for us." He shook his head. "I can't go on much further." Bess glanced around. The forest offered little. She could see the shadows of abandoned cabins in the distance, hints of a small settlement along the creek. They could hide there, at least for the night. They ran. The storm worsened. Lightning cut the sky, illuminating the ruined plantation behind them. Daniel's coughing grew worse. His fever spiked. Bess tore strips from her skirt and bandaged his shoulder as best she could, cleaning the wound with rainwater. "Do you think anyone will survive the fire?" Daniel asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Bess did not answer. Survival was relative. The Hargroves were likely gone. Virgil, she did not know. The house, she hoped, had satisfied its hunger and would sleep again. They reached the edge of the small settlement. Empty cabins leaned at impossible angles, abandoned by families who had fled the war or succumbed to disease. Bess led Daniel into the largest one, the floor slick with mud and rainwater. She helped him inside, laying him down on a pile of straw. "Sleep will come soon," she whispered, pressing her hand against his forehead. The night was alive with sounds. The storm continued to rage outside, but there were other noises too. Footsteps on distant roads, shouts carried by the wind, and beneath it all, a quiet, persistent groaning, as if the earth itself remembered every cruelty committed on it. Bess shivered. She had thought she was invisible. She had thought she could move through the world unnoticed. But the fire, the storm, the war itself, had changed that. Nothing in her life would ever be invisible again. Morning came. The storm had passed, leaving the forest slick and glistening. Birds returned cautiously, their calls sharp against the quiet. Smoke still rose in the distance from the remains of the Hargrove plantation. Bess checked Daniel. He was alive, fever broken but weak. She helped him to his feet. "We need to keep moving," she said. "Union patrols will sweep through here soon." He nodded. He could no longer walk without her support. She wrapped his arm over her shoulder, guiding him through the forest. Along the way, they passed signs of destruction. Horses, abandoned or dead. Crops trampled. Fences ripped apart. The landscape of the plantation was a ruin, a testament to the anger of a war that devoured everything in its path. At the edge of a creek, Bess paused. She knelt beside the water, washing Daniel's hands, his face. She looked up at the ruins in the distance. The house had claimed some, spared others, and left the rest to fate. She did not know which category they fell into. She only knew that they had survived the night, and that survival was the first step. Daniel looked at her. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. Bess shook her head. "We only survived because the house allowed it. Not because of us." He did not argue. Behind them, the smoke rose like a warning. The forest whispered, carrying the scent of burned wood and old secrets. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere else, the wind carried the faint sound of marching feet. Bess knew this was not over. Not for Daniel. Not for her. Not for the house. The Hargrove Plantation was gone, but its memory would follow them. Its hunger would follow them. Its shadows would stretch long and dark across the lands of Georgia. And somewhere, in the ruins of that burned house, the cellar waited. Waiting for the next secret, the next soul, the next moment when darkness and human cruelty collided. Bess looked at Daniel. Together, they would face what came next. But the forest, the war, and the echoes of the Hargrove house made one thing clear. Nothing would ever be simple again. And nothing would ever be safe. If you want, I can continue with part 6, where Union soldiers investigate the plantation ruins. Bess and Daniel face betrayal from someone they trust. The horror of the root cellar escalates, revealing even darker secrets. This will keep the tension rising toward the story's climax. Part 6. The Hunt in the Shadows. Some secrets cannot stay buried. The morning after the Hargrove Plantation burned, the air smelled of wet ash and fear. Smoke still curled from the ruins, and the red clay soil was soaked with rain and trampled by fleeing animals. Bess and Daniel had found temporary shelter in the abandoned settlement, but safety was an illusion. Union soldiers were moving through the county. Their boots cracked through the mud, rifles slung across shoulders, eyes sharp for anything unusual. Every cabin, every field, every ruined fence line was a potential hiding place for Confederate loyalists or hidden spies. Bess felt it before she saw it. Movement along the creek, shadows slipping between the trees. Soldiers, their blue coats sharp against the green forest, scanning the woods like predators. "We have to go," she whispered to Daniel. He nodded, but his legs trembled. The wound in his shoulder, though improving, still slowed him. He could barely lift himself without her support. They slipped through the trees, careful to avoid broken branches or puddles that would give away their path. Bess remembered the hidden paths she had used as a child, the narrow trails along the creek lined with thick brush and overhanging limbs. It was these memories that kept them alive. Behind them, the sound of soldiers grew closer. Footsteps pounding the muddy earth, voices calling out. "Stop," Bess hissed. They crouched low in the underbrush, rain dripping from leaves onto their shoulders. Bess's heart pounded so hard she thought the soldiers could hear it. One soldier passed within 10 feet of them. He sniffed the air, muttered something to his companion, and continued down the creek without noticing the two figures pressed against the mud. Daniel exhaled, relief escaping in a soft sigh. Bess's mind was already moving. "We cannot stay here. They will search every ruin, every cabin. We need to find real shelter, somewhere no one expects anyone to be." "But where?" Daniel shook his head. "I cannot walk much farther. My strength is gone." Bess surveyed the surrounding woods. Then she remembered. There was an old mill on the far side of the creek, abandoned for years, its wheel rotted, its foundation cracked. People said it was haunted. Others said it was cursed. Perfect, she thought. They struggled through the mud and brush, crossing the creek at a shallow bend. Daniel stumbled several times, and Bess caught him each time, whispering encouragements. The rain had stopped, but the forest was slippery and slick, every step a potential disaster. At last, they reached the mill. Its timbered walls were blackened with age, windows boarded with mismatched planks. The water wheel leaned dangerously to one side, still wet and moss-covered. It was the perfect place to disappear. Bess helped Daniel inside. The air smelled of rot and mildew. Water dripped from the ceiling onto the dirt floor, making puddles that mirrored the broken sky above. "We can stay here," Bess said. "At least for a few days." Daniel sank onto a pile of rotting sacks. He shivered. "How long before they find us?" Bess did not answer. She did not know. That night, as the wind howled through broken windows, Bess thought of the root cellar beneath the Hargrove house. It was not just the cellar itself that haunted her. It was the memory of hands reaching out from the dark, dragging Virgil into the shadows. The sense of hunger in the wood, the whispers that lingered long after the flames had died. She shivered. Some things cannot be explained, only survived. Days passed. Bess scavenged for food, small roots and berries she remembered from childhood, scraps left behind in abandoned cabins. Daniel rested, weak but alive. At night, Bess would sit near the doorway of the mill, candle in hand, watching the forest for any sign of approaching soldiers or dangers. Then, one evening, they heard it. Footsteps. Not the clumsy boots of soldiers, but soft, deliberate. A whistle, low and strange, carried through the woods. Bess froze. Daniel looked at her. "Who is it?" Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the trees. Tall, lean, with a dark hood covering most of his face. His eyes gleamed in the candlelight as he stepped closer. Bess tightened her grip on the candle. "Who are you?" The man raised his hands. "Don't be afraid. I am not here to hurt you." "How do we know that?" Bess demanded. "Because I am like you," he said softly. "I know what it is to hide. To be invisible. I have been watching you. I have been waiting." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "You shouldn't follow us," Bess whispered. The stranger smiled faintly. "I do not follow. I guide. You are walking into danger you cannot see. The Union soldiers are moving faster than you imagine. They will scour these woods within days." Bess felt a chill. "How do you know this?" He lowered his voice. "There are things I have seen, things the Hargrove house wanted hidden. Things that walk in the shadows, waiting for the curious." Bess thought of the root cellar. Of Virgil being dragged into darkness. Of the hands that had reached from the walls. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To survive," he said. "To survive, you must listen. The Hargrove house is not gone. Its hunger has moved. It waits for those who seek secrets. And it is not alone." Daniel coughed violently. Bess leaned closer, helping him. The man raised a finger, signaling silence. "Listen." From the forest came a sound. Low at first, almost a whisper. Then louder, a chorus of moans and groans, like hundreds of voices carried by the wind. Branches snapped under unseen weight. Something moved just beyond the edge of the trees. Bess's heart raced. The forest seemed alive, the shadows shifting and twisting unnaturally. The man spoke. "Those who take from the Hargrove house rarely escape. You have been lucky so far. But luck is fragile. You must leave the mill before the next moon." Daniel grabbed Bess's arm. "Leave? Where would we go?" "Anywhere. Anywhere the hunger cannot reach. Anywhere they will not follow." Bess nodded, determination growing in her chest. She had survived the house. She had survived the fire. She had survived Union patrols. She could survive this too. The man turned away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving only silence and the rustle of leaves behind. Bess helped Daniel to the far side of the mill, preparing to leave at first light. Her hands were blistered from the long days of helping him. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. But her eyes burned with resolve. The Hargrove house had taught her something. Survival was not passive. It required action, courage, and a willingness to face what others would run from. And for Bess and Daniel, the worst was not yet over. Something waited in the woods, something older than the war, older than the Hargroves. Something that remembered every wrong, every cruelty, every secret buried in the red clay of Georgia. Bess took a deep breath. "We move at dawn," she said. And in the darkness outside the mill, the forest whispered back. It was ready, it was patient, it was hungry. "If you want, I can continue with part 7, where?" Bess and Daniel face betrayal from someone they thought could help. The root cellar's horrors extend beyond imagination. The story escalates towards supernatural revelations. This will keep the tension and horror escalating toward the climax. "Do you want me to continue with part 7? "Part 7. Shadows that remember. The forest does not forget. Even as the sun rose over the burnt fields of the Hargrove Plantation, Bess and Daniel knew their struggle was far from over. The woods they had fled into seemed alive, pressing in on them with a silent, watchful hunger. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch set Bess's nerves on edge. She had learned to see danger before it appeared, but even she felt the pull of something darker this time. Daniel leaned heavily against a tree, the bandages on his shoulders still damp from sweat. "We can't keep running like this," he said. Bess shook her head. "We have to. There's no one here to help us." No one. They moved slowly, following the faint trail of the creek they had used to escape the mill. The forest seemed to shift around them. Shadows that had been harmless in daylight became twisted, elongated, almost human at night. Bess's heart pounded as the air grew colder, and the fog began to settle over the creek like a ghostly sheet. They had been walking for hours when Bess noticed something unusual. A small cabin, hidden deep in the trees, smoke rising from its chimney. She paused, signaling Daniel to stop. "Could it be safe?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Who lives here? Everyone we meet could be a threat." Bess's instincts told her to approach carefully. They crept toward the cabin, staying low, using the underbrush for cover. As they drew closer, a figure appeared at the doorway. An old man, thin, with wild white hair and eyes that gleamed like steel. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice raspy but sharp. "We need help," Bess said, trying to sound brave. The old man studied them. Then he nodded slowly. "Follow me." Inside, the cabin smelled of herbs and smoke, the walls lined with jars of dried roots, powders, and strange concoctions. Bess's eyes widened. This man knew about medicine. "You are hurt," he said, looking at Daniel. "And you, girl, you have fire in your eyes." Bess swallowed. Fire, yes. She felt it every day, that burning need to survive, to protect, to act when others could not. The old man went to Daniel, examining his shoulder. "Infection has set in deep," he said. "If left untreated, it will kill him within a week." "I can help," Bess said. "I know some things." The man's eyes narrowed. "You, a child, the fire in your eyes is stronger than most adults." "Very well, I will teach you what is needed." For the next several days, Bess learned under the old man's watchful eye. He showed her herbs that could cleanse wounds, roots that could reduce fever, and leaves that would stop bleeding. She soaked rags in herbal teas and wrapped Daniel's shoulder, applying the treatments with care. Slowly, he began to improve. But the forest outside was not idle. At night, whispers rose among the trees, voices she could not understand, carrying anger and sorrow. Shadows stretched longer than the light allowed, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Bess knew the root cellar had followed them. She had felt it, even before arriving at the cabin. Its presence lingered, invisible but insistent, like a predator circling its prey. Then one night, it struck. Bess awoke to a sound unlike anything she had heard before. A low moan, followed by a scratching at the cabin walls. Daniel stirred, groaning in pain. The old man muttered in his sleep, rolling over, oblivious. Bess grabbed a lantern and stepped outside. The fog hung thick in the air, wet and cold against her skin. In the trees, shapes moved, darting just beyond the lantern light. Eyes gleamed, reflecting the flame like tiny mirrors. "Something is here," she whispered. Before Daniel could respond, a figure appeared from the mist. Not human, not quite. A shadow with a twisted shape, hunched and long-limbed. Its presence brought cold that bit into her bones, a fear older than the war itself. Bess stepped back. "Who are you?" The shadow spoke, or perhaps the voice came from the wind itself. "You cannot escape the dead of the Hargroves. The blood in the clay, the screams, the hidden hands, they remember. They wait." Daniel staggered forward. "We are not them," he shouted. "We survived the house." The shadow moved closer. Survival is not enough. It hungers for reckoning. It hungers for those who carry the secrets. Bess felt something she had never felt before. A connection to the past, to the cellar, to the invisible cries of those who had suffered and died. She realized the shadow was not just anger, it was memory. Every injustice, every cruelty, Every hidden sin of the Hargroves had taken form, and now it had followed them into the forest. "We can make it stop," Bess said, her voice firm, though her hands trembled. The shadow paused, tilting as if curious. "How?" it asked, the words echoing in the wind. "By remembering, by acknowledging," she said. "By taking the pain, the secrets, and not letting them remain hidden. We honor the ones who suffered." The shadow seemed to hesitate. Then slowly, it receded into the fog, leaving only the echo of its moans behind. Bess sank to the ground, heart hammering. Daniel knelt beside her, holding her hands. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though she felt drained. For the first time, she understood the weight they carried. The Hargroves' cruelty had left scars deeper than the flesh. And though they had escaped the house, the consequences followed them, growing into something that could not be ignored. The old man emerged, muttering about the wind, about restless spirits. But Bess knew better. This was no ordinary haunting. It was history itself, refusing to be forgotten. The next morning, Bess and Daniel packed their few belongings. The cabin had given them refuge and knowledge, but it was no longer safe. They had to move, to stay ahead of soldiers, and now, to stay ahead of something far older. As they walked into the mist, Bess glanced back at the trees. Shadows lingered among the trunks, watching, waiting, patient. They had survived the Hargroves. They had survived Union patrols. But the forest had taught her something terrifying. Some horrors do not end with fire, bullets, or blood. Some horrors remember. And some follow you, quietly, endlessly, until justice is served or the living become part of the memory themselves. Bess took a deep breath. "We move east," she said. "Keep the creek on our left, follow the old logging path." "We cannot stop." Daniel nodded. His eyes were sharper now, alert to every sound. Together, they stepped forward into the fog, into the unknown. And somewhere behind them, the forest whispered. It remembered. It waited. It hungered. If you want, I can continue with part 8, where the story escalates into the supernatural horrors of the Hargrove legacy, increasing suspense and setting up the climax. Do you want me to write part 8 next? Part 8. The Haunting of Talbot Woods. The trees have ears. Bess and Daniel had been walking for hours, the fog thick and suffocating, every branch scratching at their skin like fingernails of the past. The forest was alive with whispers, low, almost human sounds that made Bess freeze in place more than once. She could feel it watching, feeling the weight of history pressing down on them. Daniel limped slightly, his shoulder healing but still weak. "We need to find shelter," he said. Bess nodded, scanning the trees. Something about this place felt wrong. She had survived the Hargroves, survived Virgil, survived the hidden cellar, but this forest carried a different kind of danger. One that was older than war, older than plantations, older than anything she had ever known. They followed a faint trail of broken branches and trampled leaves, hoping it would lead them to a clearing or another cabin. Shadows shifted in the fog, and Bess swore she saw figures moving just beyond her vision. Every time she turned her head, there was nothing, yet the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Then they heard it, a child's cry. High-pitched, echoing, sorrowful. Bess froze. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "Do you hear that?" "Yes," she whispered. "We shouldn't go." But the sound pulled at her, strange and haunting. She couldn't ignore it. Something about the voice reminded her of all the invisible children who had suffered on plantations like the Hargroves. Something about it called to her. Carefully, they approached the source, the fog clearing slightly to reveal an abandoned cabin, its windows broken and door hanging on crooked hinges. The air around it was thick, heavy, and metallic, like old blood. Inside, the floor was littered with broken furniture and rotting boards. But in the corner, curled up and shivering, was a small child. A girl, no older than 8, with eyes wide with terror. Bess knelt slowly, speaking softly. "Hey, it's okay. We won't hurt you." The girl flinched but did not move away. She had no shoes, and her clothes were torn. Dirt and grime covered her skin. Daniel stepped forward. "Who left her here?" he asked. Bess shook her head. "Doesn't matter. We help her." As they approached, the fog seemed to thicken, curling around the walls and floor like living smoke. Bess felt it brush against her skin, cold and heavy, whispering words she could not understand. The girl's lips trembled. They won't let me leave, she whispered. Bess frowned. Who won't let you leave? The fog shifted, and a shadow formed at the corner of the cabin. It was taller than a man, hunched, limbs twisting at impossible angles. Its eyes were dark pits, empty yet all-seeing. Bess took a step back. Daniel grabbed her arm. What is that? The shadow's voice came not from its mouth, but from everywhere at once, deep and hollow. You cannot leave. The blood of the Hargroves anchors you here. The debts unpaid, the screams unheeded. You belong to the memory of suffering. Bess's hands shook, but she stood her ground. We're not them, she said. We survived the Hargroves. We don't belong to your memory. The shadow paused, tilting, as if considering her words. But its presence pressed down, heavy, making every breath a struggle. Then the girl cried out. The shadow lashed toward her, black mist swirling like water. Bess grabbed her, pulling her behind Daniel, and for a moment it seemed the darkness would swallow them. Then Bess remembered something. The root cellar. The hidden space under the Hargrove house. She remembered the marks, the scratches, the small handprints in the mud. The memory had power. She pressed her hands together and spoke aloud. We remember every injustice, every hidden cry, every soul that suffered here. We honor them. We will not be afraid. The shadow recoiled, the darkness thinning as if struck by light. It wailed, a sound that made the floor shake and dust fall from the rafters. And then, slowly, it withdrew, sliding back into the corners of the cabin until it was gone, leaving only fog and the faint smell of earth and decay. Bess knelt beside the girl. Are you all right? She asked. The girl nodded weakly, burying her face in Bess's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel looked around warily. That wasn't just a spirit. That was the past itself. All the cruelty, all the pain, all the secrets of the Hargrove Plantation, they had followed them here, given form, and demanded recognition. Bess nodded. They survived because they acknowledged it. They honored the suffering. And now, somehow, they had a chance to move forward. The old man's words from the cabin in the woods came back to her. Some horrors do not end with fire, bullets, or blood. Some horrors remember. But Bess had learned something important. Some horrors can be faced. Some can be tamed with courage, with compassion, with the willingness to act when no one else will. They stayed in the cabin until dawn, the girl sleeping between them. When the first light touched the trees, the fog began to lift. The forest seemed quieter, though still alive with unseen eyes. Bess stood outside, looking back at the cabin. The shadows may return, but they would not control her. Not now, not ever. We have to keep moving, she said. We can't stay here. Daniel nodded. But where do we go? Bess traced the creek with her fingers, remembering the paths she had learned as a child in the Hargrove fields. We follow the water. It always leads somewhere. As they stepped into the forest, Bess felt a strange sense of purpose settle over her. She had faced the Hargroves, the hidden soldier, the deadly forest, and the living shadows of the past. And she was still standing. The forest whispered behind them, soft and low. But this time, Bess did not flinch. She walked forward, carrying not just herself, but the memory of all those who had suffered before. And somewhere deep in the trees, the Hargroves' secrets waited, still watching, still hungry. But Bess was ready. She would not be invisible anymore. If you want, I can continue with part 9, where the story moves toward its climactic confrontation and dark revelations. Do you want me to write part 9 next? Part 9. The Secrets Beneath Hargrove. The wind had a voice that night. Bess and Daniel crouched behind a thicket, the moon slicing through the trees in silver knives. Their journey through Talbot Woods had been long, but they could feel the Hargroves' shadow following them, stretching far beyond the plantation, beyond the forests, like a stain that refused to fade. Daniel winced as he shifted his shoulder. We need to rest, he said. Bess shook her head. Not yet. Not until we see it with our own eyes. She led him silently, the girl from the cabin clinging to her skirts. She had named herself Lila, though she had barely spoken since their encounter in the fog. Bess had promised her safety, and she would keep that promise, no matter the cost. Ahead, the ruins of the Hargrove Plantation appeared through the trees. The main house stood like a skeleton of the past, its windows empty, eyes staring into the night. The front porch had collapsed, and the magnolia trees had rotted into twisted shapes that seemed to reach for the sky like pleading hands. But it was the cellar door that drew Bess forward. The boards had been replaced with new wood, unweathered, hiding the secrets beneath. She knew, somehow, that the truth had never left this place. That the thing Thomas Hargrove had tried to bury had only grown stronger in the darkness. "We shouldn't go in," Daniel said, his voice trembling. Bess shook her head. "We have to. Whatever is down there, it's part of everything that happened. We need to end it." The thicket fell behind them as they approached the cellar. The door was locked, heavy iron binding it tight. Bess examined the lock, her small hands nimble from years of scraping, cleaning, and surviving unseen. "Give me a moment," she whispered. Minutes later, the door groaned open. A cold, fetid breath escaped, carrying with it the smell of mold, decay, and something far older, far darker than the Hargroves themselves. Inside, the cellar was smaller than she remembered, but the walls were covered in scratches, handprints, symbols that made her stomach twist. Hundreds of marks etched into wood and stone, some human, some not. Daniel whispered, "What is all this?" Bess shook her head. "I don't know, but it's been here a long time. Longer than the plantation." The darkness seemed to pulse, as if alive, wrapping around them, pressing against their skin, seeping into their lungs. The floorboards creaked under their weight, echoing like footsteps of the past. Then they saw it. In the far corner, hidden beneath a pile of rotting blankets, lay a coffin-sized box. Its wood was dark with age, the iron fittings rusted but intact. And inside, a figure, small, twisted, neither fully human nor fully shadow. Its eyes opened as they approached, glowing faintly in the candlelight Bess carried. Bess stepped back. "What is that?" The thing spoke, its voice a rasp, echoing from everywhere at once. "You should not have come." Daniel gripped her arm. "Step back." Bess held her ground. "No, we need answers. We know your history. We know what Thomas Hargrove did." The shadow laughed, a sound that made the walls shiver. "History does not belong to the living. It belongs to the forgotten." "I am not forgotten," Bess said, her voice steady, braver than she felt. "We remember the children, the slaves, the suffering you witnessed. We will carry it forward." The creature shifted, its form flickering, revealing glimpses of the Hargrove family, their faces twisted with cruelty and panic. "The things they had hidden, the secrets they had tried to bury, they are mine now." Daniel stepped closer, despite his weakness. "What do you want from us?" The shadow leaned forward. "Witness. Remember. Speak." Bess swallowed. Then she spoke. She spoke of the enslaved people, of the hidden lives, of the suffering that had never been acknowledged. She spoke of Daniel, of the choices he had made, of his awakening. She spoke of Lila, the lost children, and every soul whose life had been swallowed by greed, fear, and cruelty. The shadow listened, silent now, but the air around them quivered, the scratches on the walls seeming to move, as if alive with recognition. Then, slowly, the thing receded. The glow in its eyes dimmed. The air lightened. The cellar was just a cellar again, dark and damp, but no longer alive with menace. Bess exhaled, trembling. "Is it gone?" Daniel nodded, though his eyes never left the corner. "I think so." The three of them stayed there a long moment, catching their breath, listening to the quiet. For the first time, the cellar felt empty of secrets. "We need to leave this place," Bess said. "For good." They climbed the stairs, careful not to disturb the boards. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking, casting the ruins in a pale, forgiving glow. The wind was still, the forest silent. Bess looked back at the plantation one last time. The Hargroves were gone, their legacy of fear and cruelty exposed. The forest would remember, yes, but now the memory was shared with those who survived, those who bore witness. Lila clung to her hand, and Bess felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. They had survived the Hargroves, the shadow of history, and the forest itself. They were alive, and the past had been confronted. But as they walked toward freedom, Bess knew the story was not over. Some shadows linger, some secrets refuse to die. And when they do rise again, those who remember will be ready. For now, though, there was light. For now, the darkness had been faced. And Bess, for the first time, felt that being invisible no longer meant being powerless. They walked on, carrying with them the memories of the lost, the haunted, and the forgotten, determined to speak their story to the world. Because history, as terrifying as it can be, belongs to those brave enough to face it. If you want, I can now create part 10, the final and climactic conclusion, bringing the story to a shocking and satisfying resolution for your audience. Do you want me to write part 10 next? Part 10, The Last Secret of Hargrove. The Hargrove Plantation had a heartbeat that night. Bess, Daniel, and Lila returned to the ruins, driven not by curiosity but by a need to confront what had been left behind. The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of decayed wood and old earth. The forest seemed to lean in, listening, waiting. Bess held the candle tight, its light trembling against the shadows. The wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying voices she almost recognized, screams of the past, laughter twisted by cruelty, the whispers of those who had suffered and never been seen. Daniel limped forward, his shoulder bandaged and healed but still sore. I still don't like this, he said. Bess shook her head. We can't run forever. If there's a secret here, we have to face it. The cellar door waited, the old iron lock rusted but firm. Bess pried it open carefully, heart hammering in her chest. The smell hit them first, damp, rot, and something else. Something metallic, like dried blood. Inside, the cellar was silent, but the scratches and marks on the walls seemed alive. Hundreds of handprints, some human, some small, some impossibly old, twisted across the boards and stone. And in the far corner, the coffin-sized box waited, exactly where it had been when they left. Bess stepped closer. This is it, she whispered. The secret they never wanted anyone to find. Slowly, she lifted the lid. The candlelight fell across the contents, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a journal, bound in cracked leather, yellowed with age. The name Thomas Hargrove was scrawled across the first page, messy and urgent. Bess opened it, scanning the pages. The entries told a story darker than anything they had imagined. Thomas had not only hidden the wounded Confederate soldier but had experimented with fear itself. He had kept a hidden cell beneath the root cellar long before the war, trapping children and slaves to study their reactions, to watch how despair could bend a person's will. The scratches on the walls, the handprints, they were not only marks of suffering, they were records. Daniel leaned close, his eyes wide. This is monstrous. Bess nodded. And it gets worse. The journal described rituals, small, twisted acts meant to draw power from fear, to control not just bodies but minds. Thomas's father had begun it, and Thomas had continued. He had killed those who resisted, hidden those who survived, and used the plantation as a laboratory of terror. Lila whimpered, hiding her face against Bess. Some of those children, some of them were like me, she whispered. Bess held her tightly. It's okay, she said. We'll make sure their story is heard. But there was more. As Bess turned the pages, a folded bundle fell out. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, addressed to someone named Virgil. They described the final 9 months before the Hargroves vanished. They had fled, yes, but not before leaving behind something alive in the cellar. Daniel frowned. Something alive, Bess read aloud. The letters hinted at a presence, a shadow formed from the accumulated fear and suffering of decades. The shadow had grown powerful, intelligent. It watched, it waited, it fed on secrecy. And when the Union soldiers arrived, the Hargroves disappeared because they were taken, not by men, but by the force they had created. A cold wind swept through the cellar. The candle flickered, casting long, twisting shadows across the walls. And then they felt it. Eyes on them, watching from the corners, from the darkness beyond the light. The shadow was real. It had waited, patient and hungry, and now it sensed new witnesses. Bess gripped the journal and the letters. We face it. We remember everything. The air shifted, and the shadows in the cellar coalesced into a form. Taller than a man, darker than night, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting all the fear, all the suffering Thomas Hargrove had ever caused. "You remember," it whispered. "You remember what they did." "Yes," Bess said, steadying her voice. "We remember. And we carry their story." The shadow hesitated, as if confused by her bravery. Its voice deepened, more sorrow than anger now. "The pain, the fear, it lives." It was then that Bess realized something. The shadow was not Thomas Hargrove. It was the suffering itself, made tangible by centuries of cruelty, fear, and neglect. And it had waited for someone to witness, someone to honor those lost souls. Daniel stepped forward. "We acknowledge it. We honor them. The children, the slaves, everyone who suffered here. You are not alone anymore." The shadow shivered. It stretched, wavered, and then slowly began to dissipate. The darkness lifted, leaving only the faint smell of earth and candle smoke. The cellar was empty, silent, peaceful, for the first time in more than a century. Bess closed the journal carefully, holding it like a talisman. The secrets were out, the story told, and the shadow that had haunted the Hargrove plantation could rest. Lila tugged at her sleeve. "Are they gone?" Bess smiled gently. "Yes. They can rest now." They emerged into the dawn, the ruins quiet in the soft morning light. The forest no longer seemed alive with menace, only alive with memory. The horrors of the past had been confronted, and for the first time, Bess felt free. Daniel looked at her, gratitude and awe in his eyes. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "Braver than anyone I've ever known." Bess shook her head. It wasn't bravery. It was survival. It was remembering. It was choosing to be seen. As they walked away from the Hargrove plantation for the last time, Bess knew that the story would not be forgotten. She would speak it aloud. She would tell the world what had happened here. The suffering, the cruelty, the courage, all of it. And somewhere, deep in the woods, the shadows that once haunted the Hargroves faded completely, their power broken by witness and truth. The Hargrove plantation, the cellar, the hidden rooms, the suffering, they were no longer secrets. And Bess, for the first time in her life, was truly free. The sun rose over Talbot County, Georgia, casting gold across the red clay fields, over the forest, and the ruined house that had once been a prison of fear. The story of the Hargroves had ended, but the memory lived on, carried by those brave enough to confront it and tell it. History had been faced. Darkness had been challenged, and the ghosts of the past had finally been acknowledged. And for Bess, Daniel, and Lila, the world felt wide, bright, and full of possibility. The shadows had gone, but the story would never be forgotten.